Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to the channel. My stories of oddity, stories of audible oddness. That's what it is, yeah. And this time around, it's all about MMO. That was a hard one to say. Games and the crazy experiences that I've had with Final Fantasy XIV and Rust. And those two being the ones that I've had the most problems with because I haven't really played a whole bunch of MMO RPGs or MMO games in general, other than a lot of like first-person shooters, of course, and then there's been a little bit of Black Desert and Elder Scrolls Online thrown into that mix, but most of the time, Rust, Final Fantasy XIV. Alrighty, so let's get started, starting with Rust. Well, okay, so I've been playing Rust since back in the alpha days, so about 2015, 2016-ish is about the time I started. So this was back in the days of blueprint fragments. If anyone who's familiar with Rust remembers blueprint fragments, that's how long I've been playing this game. So a long time. So that was back when you actually had to craft blueprints from blueprint fragments, and you could take the blueprint pages and then combine those and make a blueprint book and possibly get like a high-ranking item out of it. This is also back in the days where you could very easily grief other players, which I have had happen to me quite a numerous times playing the game, but I also had my fair share of griefing other people as well. If you don't know what griefing is, this is basically the ability to lock a player into their base, rendering it useless for them, and basically kind of like just screwing them over, because then they basically would just get like stuck in their own base and they wouldn't be able to escape from it, and then they basically have to start over from scratch because they weren't able to loot their own base to bring their items with them once they were able to like eventually get out of the base. And then the other way that you could do it was by causing them to be locked out of their base. So you can either lock them in their base or lock them out of their base. Locking a person out of their base basically required you to try to figure out if you could just wall up their main entrance, rendering it useless. This also works the other way around, locking them in the base too. There were a few other ways to do this, but those were the two primary ways. Other methods included if the player was starting out with a keyed lock, was getting a hold of their key, figuring out which base was theirs, and then locking them out of the base that way. Because it was back when, after you crafted a wood lock and a key for that lock, you could carry the key to that lock on you. And this has since been removed, so you can't really do that anymore. But most of the time playing Rust, it would come from players that would just be doing dickish things. Like, I had one player who was constantly raiding me in a friend's base, like soon after we first started playing the game, and the guy would keep coming in through the window. And this is back when it was actually a lot more difficult to try to fit through a window than it is now. It's like super easy to do, but back then it was something that took a little bit of trickiness and skill to do. But like every single night, guy would come over, hop up onto the roof, squeeze through the window, and then raid the base. And this was one of the base layouts that a friend of mine did, where things were kind of like separated onto different floors. So how the base was designed was there was easy access from the first floor to the third floor, but it was actually very tricky to try to figure out how to get onto the second floor. And that's one of the things that really pissed off this other player, because he was having a really hard time trying to figure out how to get onto the second floor because of how the base was set up, and he even kind of like complained about it too. And I just thought it was funny because of the fact that he was trying to get onto the second floor and he could never figure it out, and because of him trolling raiding the base, and it just was getting to the point where I guess that might have been why he kept effectively coming over and raiding the base. But he was being a bit of a nuisance to like everybody on the server that we used to play on. The server we used to play on is no longer around anymore, unfortunately, because it was actually a really good structured server. And the admins, whenever they caught cheaters in the game, because eventually the person who had been constantly raiding the base that we had got caught cheating, and his clan got caught cheating. So the admins, what they would do is they would pick up players who cheated, bring them all the way up, really high up in the sky, and then drop them, have them hit the ground, and then after that, they get removed from the server. And there's been like other few instances off and on with that, where you just find like this unruly players that really don't give much of a fair advantage to other players, especially when they're first starting out. Happens a lot, you know. You'll get like these big Rust clans, and they'll go out and they'll start raiding smaller bases that people are just really trying to get this established, so the fact that they can build up enough resources so they can go out and do raiding themselves. But you don't really get the chance to do that with these toxic players who pretty much just try to dominate the entire map. And there's like a few other things that had happened like later on, where we had some base campers where a friend and I had built a base inside of a giant rock structure that you don't really see these rock structures in Rust very often anymore. And again, it was the same thing where they kept on camping on top of the rock structure, and then like picking us off every time we tried to, you know, leave our own base to go collect resources. Eventually, those people finally gave up because the base was actually pretty large, you know, because of it using the rock structure as most of its foundation. Everything was inside the rock structure, so it was actually difficult to navigate once they got in there. But it was a really nice setup, and I actually miss those days of Rust. This is also back when they had the anvil rocks too, if anyone remembers those. The anvil rocks, a lot of players like to try to get on top of and build a base up there because it's difficult to get to, and the maps used to be just littered with these kinds of bases. And I can remember like ages ago, you know, this huge base being built on top of an anvil rock in this really dense lush forest, and you don't have the dense lush forest anymore either. But that player stayed there like the entire time, and never had an encounter with them. Wasn't a toxic player apparently, because, you know, I never heard anything in the chats about people in the area that were, you know, had a base near that person. And those were the good days, I feel like, of Rust. Even though it was toxic, it's still pretty toxic today too, but it was just a different atmosphere, and I really miss what Rust was back then, and how today, being 10 years later, it's not the same game anymore. But I only play on occasion. It's not very often anymore, but that's pretty much the two like major instances I had with playing Rust and toxic players. Most of the toxicity from playing MMO games comes out of Final Fantasy XIV, because that's the one I've played the most, and I've been playing it for about as long as Rust, but I've been a much more active player in Final Fantasy XIV than I've ever been in Rust. I've probably logged somewhere around 6,000 to 7,000 total playtime hours playing the game since 2016, since the launch of Heaven's Ward. Yeah, that's how long I've been playing Final Fantasy XIV, so I've had my fair share of toxic madness in that game, and some of it has even come from my own free company. Some it's been a little bit more subtle, like we did have this one player in my free company. They weren't really toxic, they were just kind of weird and kind of on the pervy side. So I play as a female character, and he was constantly typing in chat like whispers of like obscenities and things like that to me, and it was just getting really annoying. So eventually I just reported it to my FC leader and had to talk with the guy, and he stayed in the group. He stayed in the FC. He didn't get kicked out of it. And to this day, that player is still in my former FC. FC stands for Free Company, if you didn't know. And for those who don't play Final Fantasy XIV. And the thing is that the guy doesn't really play the game anymore. And yeah, I know it's a guy because we used to talk in chats and stuff. And for the longest time, he thought it was a female player, and that's why he was doing that. But then again, you don't do that to a female player. You don't do that to a player. Period. You don't talk obscenities or rudeness or things like that. But it was, I can't really say a whole lot being YouTube, because of possible demonetization reasons, as you know. But yeah, some of it got pretty bad. Some of the other toxicity in Final Fantasy XIV had come from encounters with other players, but real quick on that note, I do have another instance of a former FC member who, again, wasn't really pervy or ever really all that bad, when it came to, like, obscenities in the chats. This particular one was more like, more that chauvinist male supremacy kind of type mentality, who kind of thought that he was all it, and better than anybody else in the free company. And I had a few encounters with that person as well, being incredibly rude to me. There was this one time when we were trying to take down, it was either a fate or it was a hunt that we were doing. It might have been a fate. I think it was actually, I come to think of it, it was a fate. One of the special ones that pops every once in a while. This was in the Shroud. I don't remember exactly where in the Shroud, but if you're familiar with the tower where you start the Stormblood expansion storyline, right around that area. So like the entrance that leads into Alamigo, where the big, black gates of Doom are. So it was like close to that, where that, like I said, that big scaffolding tower is at. And I was having trouble trying to find the fate, partly because I had just woken up, I just logged in, I saw the thing pop in the chats, and they're like, yeah, I can help you out and stuff like that. Just please post coordinates. And how you post a coordinate is by just typing, like, it's the, I forget what the key is. It's the key next to the M key that has like the backwards arrow, and then you type in POS, and then you type in, or is it POS or something along those lines, and you just type in the arrow next to it, and then you hit enter, and that will flag the area on the map where to go. So it's a positional marker. And this guy, he'd been playing for a little bit longer than me, and he didn't know how to type in a command for a positional marker in the game. And it was getting really annoying because I needed to know what the coordinates were at, so that way I could teleport into the proper instance, because this was back when we had separate instances. And if you type in a coordinal, geographic coordinate into the chats, it will mark that location in that specific instance. So that way you can port into the instance where that marker is at. And he all had to tell me like he doesn't use those and stuff and doesn't know how to do it. And I'm like, I got a little annoyed with him. I was like, you've been playing longer than me, and you don't know how to type in a positional marker. And then he started like crabbing at me about it and stuff like that. And I basically just kind of like typed it into the chat. I'm like, here, you do it like this. I'm like, I have a macro for it, because I do like fates and then like the hunts on occasion and stuff. So I have a positional marker. So that way, if I'm in a group and I see a hunt and I see like a special fate pop up, I can just drop that in there and let people know. I can just shout it, and then everybody in the whole map area can see it, and they'll know where to go to kind of come help me out. And so we got into this big heated argument over it. We took down the boss that we were fighting, got problems, but he just started just ripping into me afterwards over it. And it got, again, really problematic. I didn't want to log in anymore. A bunch of other people stopped logging in too, because there were other people in my free company who were having issues with this guy for other similar reasons. And nobody was getting along with them, except for, lo and behold, our free company leader. It's the only person who was getting along with this guy. And I had to talk with one of my other members that was in the group, and he told me too, that I stopped logging in because of so-and-so, and then I talked to another member, and she told me the same thing, and then her friend, she stopped logging in too for the same reasons, because nobody wanted to log on when this guy was on. And this guy, had tons of free time, so he's like on like all the time, so a lot of us had to wait either until like really, really late at night when he'd finally be asleep, where we could log in and try to do some stuff in the game, or super, super early in the morning. It got to the point where all of us were just trying to actively avoid logins when this guy was on. And I was just curious, especially to see how rude this person was really being to somebody, who wasn't me. So I had logged in on one of my mules, because in Final Fantasy XIV you can have multiple characters on the same account, and a couple of my mules were in the free company, and they were added to the free company before this person started, who had joined, so that we could kind of like trade items back and forth between the mules, and then like add it to the main character. And he didn't know that I had two other mules. So I log in on mule account. Not mule account, but the mule character, and just very kindly ask, hey, you know, I'm kind of new here, and I was gonna run roulettes. I need some. I'd like to have some help. You want to join me? And he kind of got all, you know, annoyed, all because I asked, and he's like, no, do it yourself, kind of thing like that. And I was like, okay, I'm just going to log out then, and yeah, we'll discuss this later on. Eventually, it was brought to the attention of our FC leader, who decided not to do anything about it. He wanted to try to keep it where everyone got along, got to stay in the group, and I'm like, well, you know, if you don't kick him out, I'm gone, because I'm not doing this anymore. And he tried really, really hard to get me to stay, and I'm like, no, I'm not doing it. You know, I mean, apparently you two are like buddy now. I don't know how much buddy you could put in. There's something with buddy, the things that start with B other than butts, but I'm like, yeah, I'm done. I'm out of here. Bye. So I was out of the FC for a while. Eventually I joined a second one that was run by another friend of mine who I had met in-game, and eventually, you know, I stayed with her group for a bit, and then she's like, you know, well, I told her, I think I'm going to go ahead and go off on my own. Thanks for adding me to the group and stuff, but it just doesn't feel the same. And she's like, yeah, it's okay. Stuff. If you ever want to come back, just let me know. And I'm like, yeah, I don't know. And so I left and started up my own free company, which I'm the only member of right now, because I've just decided, you know, I want to have my own free company to myself before I decide to start bringing new people in. But yeah, so that's pretty much it. There was one other really toxic thing that had happened in Final Fantasy XIV, where people were trying to basically troll one of the it's that big statue that's in Thanalan. I forget what part of Thanalan it's in. I think it's near Drybone, if memory serves me correctly. Yeah, actually, yeah, it's near Drybone. And it's part of the gate in the Gold Saucer, and there's this one, like, actually more than one, there's all these little beams that kind of stick out, and they're kind of really narrow. But there's about like 3 or 4 people that are like using the Play Dead emote that are spread out all over this beam, to where you really can't tell where it's at, so you can jump onto it. And it was just driving everybody freaking crazy. Like, the chats are going nuts, telling people to move, get out of the way and stuff. They won't do it. They're all typing in, they're all laughing at us, because they can see how we're struggling to try to jump onto this beam that we can't really see where it is, because they're spread out so much on it. And they just stayed like that until the end of the gate. So I ended up reporting them. Hopefully other people reported them too. The Final Fantasy devs said they would look into it. I don't think they ever did. Then again, I just don't know, because you never get any updates on these things when they happen, so they could have looked into it, but it's unknown, really. Anyways, that'll be all for this video. I do hope you enjoy and stuff, and like the drawings that I do. This one, of course, is the thumbnail to this video that I'm working on right now, which is, yeah, about MMO games. I will have some other arts later on. I want to start branching out more with these discussions, and maybe turning it into more of like a podcast kind of thing, more so than it is a video essay sort of thing that I'm doing right now. Anyways, so that'll be it. Thank you again, and have a good one out there. Stay safe. Don't forget to like, subscribe, comment, as I might have mentioned already. And yeah, all right, bye.